Good morning. This is Jim's Little Boat, and I, of course, am Jim. The long, weary, wet winter in Western Washington has begun. It lasts about 6 months. So I'm getting started on my projects that keep me sane during the winter. And the first thing I'm going to do this time is I'm going to replace the cast aluminum spreader brackets that came with the boat. Now, there's nothing visibly wrong with these right now, but they have been known to just shatter and crack and split and destroy your mast with no warning. So I figured I'll put the stainless steel replacements in. And before I start, I want to really explain that I should not be the primary source of information if you choose to do this job. They send very detailed, boring, long instructions, all written from Catalina Direct, and they would probably work. But really, the Catalina Direct video with a guy named Tim something or other, Tim Trick or whatever, is a really good source on how to do this. They haven't made very many changes at all. They've added a piece of tape. So I'm gonna say it's 30 bucks, I think, for the video. If you can buy it or borrow it or get a hold of it, that would be a much better source of instructions than what I'm gonna share with you in this video. So I've gotten started, and I'll catch you up a little bit later, but all I've done so far is read the instructions, try to familiarize myself, and I messed this up, and I'll show you that later. That's the compression tube that goes inside the mast, and I finally got that fixed, and I'll show you how I did it so that it worked for me. That's what we're gonna do. Buy the video, borrow the video, whatever you need to do, that's your very best source of instructions. Because just like I did, you're going to lock it up in a vise, and you're going to take the hacksaw and you're going to cut it off, and it's not going to be perpendicular, and then you're going to try to square it up. So here's a little idea I came up with on the second try after the folks at Catalina Direct were so gracious to sell me just another tube. Just like I did here. Look at that. Son of a gun, just a little bit too short. You know, it's always easier to take off a little more than it is to put just a little bit back. So now we're doing our second try, and we see that this one is just a little too long. I need to file or cut a little bit off. I drilled a 1/2-inch hole in a piece of plywood, and I stuck the tube up through the hole so there's just a little bit showing. And now I can gently file off a little tiny bit at a time till I dial it in to just right. And now we can take off just, tighten that up a tad, just a little tiny bit at a time. And the plywood helps us make sure that the cut is square. We'll keep doing this until it fits perfectly. Well, that's a pretty good fit. We'll deburr it and go on to the next step. We need to drill a hole through the mast that matches this hole. That'll hold the bolt and the compression tube inside the mast. Now there's a little conflict. In the video, they tell you to do a bunch of measuring and find this hole. In the instructions, they tell you to drill a hole in this socket, and that will give you the center. So I came up with a little bit different method, and I'll share that with you. Now, it's not in either one of these, but it's a variation of this one in particular. I wanted to do an accurate center hole in that socket. So I started by drilling a 1 1/4-inch hole in a 2x4 with a hole saw. And that, of course, popped out a plug that was just a little bit less than 1 inch in diameter. That left us with a nice plug. I smoothed it up with a utility knife, and I wrapped some tape on it. And now we have a nice centered hole inside the bracket that we can drill out for locating the bolt hole on the mast. We'll lock that up in the vise, and we'll just drill a hole. That worked pretty well. Okie dokie. I got a hole pretty close to center, but it's a pretty big hole. But I have this secret trick, a self-centering bit. When we get out to the mast, I'll take the self-centering bit and put it in the hole like so, and that hole will be as close to dead center as you can get in a home workshop. Kind of dark out here in the boat shed. I've remounted the bracket, and I want to see if I drew a couple little test marks, if indeed it all seems to be centered on the mast. So we'll give that a shot. A little mark on each side of the mast. You can just barely see it there in the middle. We're going to make a little jig and see if those really are the same distance from the center line. Well, this is really interesting. I'm not sure that my holes match up. In fact, I'm pretty sure they don't. And looking at this mast, I see some pencil marks that look like they were actually made at the factory. Made up this little piece of cardboard from an old cereal box, it looks like. And the tab folds so it'll go in the mast slot. So I measured the A side, and from the edge of the slot to the mark was 63 millimeters. Then I measured the other side, and that's the B side, and it was 57 millimeters. And I think 57 millimeters is the middle of the mast, more than the A side. Now, interestingly, I saw some pencil marks up there. I think I showed you that already. And they didn't use a jig to make this back in the day. It was the 70s. And they were making boats as fast as they could, and they were hired low-priced help. And so sometimes I wonder about the jigs, and I wonder how much wacky tobacco those kids were smoking that were assembling these boats. So I just went out to the boat and tried out the template, and guess what? The B side, 57 millimeters, exactly matches the pencil mark drawn on the mast 43 years ago. I'll go with that. Well, we did as suggested and drilled the hole in successive steps, and as you can see, the bolt seems to go all the way through there without a big problem. I don't know if I can stick it back in one-handed, but we're good. 5/16 bolt fits just great. Now to insert the string. This method is in the video, but it's not in the written instructions. Tim says take a piece of string and shove it through the hole so it comes out the other side using a screwdriver. I kind of just lightly taped it on there. And then pull the string out and tape it to the mast. We will use this string to pull up the compression tube inside the mast. I'll show you that when I get down on the boat and I do it. Maybe tomorrow. I have a 14-foot long pole, a piece of PVC pipe, with a hook on the end. The trick now is, can we grab that string? Hold of the string and the pipe is almost all the way out, but I'm almost out of string, and if I don't tie some more on, it'll be lost inside the mast. I think I better fix that. Great, we got the string out the bottom of the mast. So that's secure. With a little luck, we can pull the string back through the mast and line up the compression tube. Story B, just like the video said, we pulled the strings up, it held the compression tube, we got it lined up, we put a screwdriver in there, and we are ready to go on to the next step with the bolts. Unfortunately, I have to go vacuum, so we'll do this tomorrow. This is what happens when you don't read the instructions 3 times. I only read them twice. This lubricant should have gone inside the compression tube. It's to help prevent corrosion between the aluminum and the stainless steel. I'm not pulling the compression tube back out, so I'll take this stuff and I'll apply it to the bolt, and then I'll be careful and handle it with rubber gloves when I put it in. There must have been some problems in the past with corrosion on the mast, because this step is not on the video at all. They want you to line the inside of the spreader bracket with this tape, and of course they want that goop on the bolt to prevent corrosion. So I guess stainless steel against aluminum on your mast at its most vulnerable point, not a good plan. And I'm guessing that's why you need this insulation on the bolt. Must have been pretty bad for them to change this drastically. As they show in the video and as they indicate in the directions, the bolt is through the spreaders loosely and holding it all in place. So now it won't be quite so difficult, and I'll tackle it another day when it's not dark and cold. I followed the order they recommend in the video. I labeled all the shrouds and reinstalled those. Turned down the cotter pins. Of course, I had to put the upper bolt in place, and since I used the same spreaders over again, I just reinstalled those, and all I have to do is tap the cotter pins down, and we'll be done. Then we'll put the mast up in the overhead, and I can get on with my chores without bumping into it all the time.